Miniature Market has thousands of board games at discounted prices. Click the direct link below to see all of those discounted games. Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. It's the end of the year and I'm doing a whole slew of my best games of the year, all different categories. If you haven't seen any of these other ones, you can click my channel and check those out. Today, we're taking a look at my top 10 strategy games of 2023, so here we go.
Number 10.
Now this first one is called Rebuilding Seattle. The reason why this makes this list is this is a sort of city building game, a polyomino game, and an economic game all in one. You're going to be sort of drafting or buying certain tiles, which are portions of the city, and you're going to be placing them and building them on your city. You're going to be expanding them. A lot of these things will depend on, certain things adjacent to others will help you because there's lots of end game goals. You're working up, you've got a certain amount of money to spend, you're going to be spending them. Has a really interesting mechanism at the end of each of there's three sort of main rounds in the game, and at the end you're going to be scoring certain ways depending on the population that's in your neighborhood based upon the different buildings that you put there. It has an interesting interaction with that. You're also getting two sort of special buildings at the beginning of the game that are really hard to get out, but if you get them out, we'll give you some great end game scoring or maybe a good huge special ability. And you're trying to get those out too and they look really cool. You're trying to expand your city. So if you like economic games, polyomino games, tableau building games, city building games, and you want an interesting package, Rebuilding Seattle is one that flew under the radar this year.
Number 9.
This next one is also a sort of a city building polyomino game called Wild Tiled West. This is from Dire Wolf. This is an interesting game. A very popular game came out a few years ago called Planet Unknown. And this has a lot of similarities to that, but it still feels very different. If you liked that game, you're likely going to like this game. It's a Western theme, and you're going to be getting tiles. And there's an interesting drafting mechanism as how you get these tiles. You're going to be rolling these dice at the beginning of the round. These dice are going to tell you around the board which tiles you can get. Sometimes you can spend currency in order to go a little further down the river to get certain other tiles. But you're going to be placing these tiles. You're going to be then placing them sort of adjacent to each other. There's a lot of different things you're trying to do in this game. There's a lot of different strategies. You're trying to cover certain neighborhoods and get points. You're trying to, as thieves come out, you're trying to put sheriffs there to shoot them. You're trying to build up an economy. You're trying to, there's all these different partners that you can gain that will give you end game goals that you're shooting for. There's a lot of strategy in this game, in this easy game where you're, drafting a tile, placing it, but there's a lot of thought that goes into where are you placing it now, why, and all the strategies interconnecting with each other. So this game is very interesting. It's got an economic aspect where you're trying to make money. You're gaining income, you're going up an income tract. There's a lot of things going on, but the game is not overly complex, if that makes sense. So lots of depth, not crazy complex, a lot of fun, Wild Tiled West.
Number 8.
This next one is called East India Companies. Now this is sort of a heavier, longer, 2.5-hour game, maybe 3 hours if it's your first play. Highly recommend playing this with 4 players. It's by far the best player count. This game is an economic Euro game that has some aspects of power grid into it. And by those aspects, I mean like the fluctuating markets and the way that the players can control how much things cost to buy and how much you're going to be getting when you sell things. There's ways of being able to look future markets and see what's going to happen to that market. You're watching what other players are doing and you're trying to go, they already looked at what's coming future. They're buying this. I might want to buy it too. But in the end, it's a worker placement game. You're placing your workers down. Sometimes you're upgrading some ships because you're going to be using these ships to ship the goods that you're buying off to places that want to buy them. But you're going to be trading off between ships that can carry a lot but move slowly to smaller ships that move faster but you can't carry quite as much because getting there first allows you to sell first, which allows you to get more money. So it's a very interesting economic game, worker placement, lots of economic things going on, lots of income, expenses. It's a little mathy. But if you like that style of game, this is a fantastic one, East India Companies.
Number 7.
This next one, speaking of Power Grid, is a Euro game from the designer of Power Grid, Freedom and Freeze. This is called Findorf. Now, it had a small release at Essen last year, but it really came out in North America early this year. This is an interesting economic game where you're building the sort of district of Findorf with different buildings. This is a rondel game where you're moving up a rondel and taking actions, and you're upgrading different actions over the course of the game, making those more powerful, more efficient. But in the end, you've got these cards, you're trying to purchase these cards. And it's interesting because all the cards cost the same, but some of them are better earlier in the game versus end game. Some of them help you build engines to get things going earlier in the game. Some of them will just allow you to get a huge amount of points end of the game if you built things up the right way. It also has an interesting market where there's an arc to the game where between railroad tracks and peat, which is the main sort of resource in the game, these markets are going to be acting differently throughout the game. And much like Power Grid, as you could buy things up and make it more expensive for other players, or sell a bunch and then they're like, well, now I don't want to sell because it's not as good. So it has a very interesting economic aspect, an interesting arc to the game, and an interesting rondel. This game was fantastic. It plays well at all player counts. With 2 players, you can even play it in less than an hour, which is great. 4 players, 5 players, you're playing up in the 90-minute range, 75 to 90 minutes. But it is really good if you like Freedom and Freeze designs. This one is super clever. Findorf.
Number 6.
The next one is The Rich and the Good. This is a stock market game with limited information. There's a sort of a card holder in between you and the player to your left, and one between you and the player to your right. And you're going to be able to see which commodities are possibly going to go up or down a certain amount. Might say -3 or +6. It's really interesting because on your turn, you're going to take a card from one of those tableaus and play it. You're going to take one from the other tableau and you're going to play it. But one of those 2 cards, you have to cut it in half. So you can really manipulate the markets, but being able to see what's available, because all those cards are going to be used this round, but you don't know which ones the other player next to you might be pulling the cards that you want, and they might be having them, and you might not want them to. So it's interesting, a lot of player interaction, a lot of market manipulation, a lot of looking forward, and you're trying to buy and sell stocks at the right time, having that limited communication. This is a fantastic streamlined stock market game, The Rich and the Good.
Number 5.
This next one is a game that from Tiny Epic series from Gameland Games. This is called Tiny Epic Vikings. Now, I think this is my favorite game of theirs now in the Tiny Epic series. This game think of it as like a smaller version of sort of Blood Rage-ish. You're drafting cards. You're drafting people that you're going to be fighting with. You're going to be drafting cards and then taking actions. You're going to be moving around different islands. You're going to be making temples. You're going to be messing with other players. This game has a ton of interaction. It has a lot of tension. It has a lot of messing with other players. But in the end, it's a drafting game that you're moving, resource management game, and you're doing things, but everything that everyone else does has to, affects you. And you're trying to get set collection of runes that are going to help you do other things. There's, like most of their games, it sprawls out from a small box to a nice big tableau. And like most of their games, there's a huge amount of depth for how small this box is, a huge amount of replayability. So this, for me, is like, I almost don't need to play Blood Rage again after this. Because it's similar enough of the drafting and the fighting and the moving around and things like that. But there's other things going on too that I like as well. So if you like games that have high interaction, conflict between players, moving around maps, resource management, and drafting, you got to check this one out, Tiny Epic Vikings.
Number 4.
All right, this next one was one of the biggest hits of the year from Buzz. The amount of buzz this game caught. This is called Last Light, and this was designed by Roy Kennedy, who works for the Dice Tower, great guy. This is from Gray Fox Games. This game is touted as a 4X game in an hour or less, and that's pretty close. The base game plays to 4 players. The reason why they can do that is you have a full experience in an hour because most of the actions are simultaneous. You have these action cards, you're playing them down, you've got little engine building going on, you're building up technologies, you've got some asymmetric faction abilities. It's gonna make every game feel different. And you're doing these things and you're building up these engines and you're moving these ships and you're bringing ships in and you're shooting them around because you're trying to collect light by being on certain parts of the board. But then at certain times, the boards rotate and it puts you right in everyone else's faces. So it really speeds and escalates everything up. It's a really good job. There is conflict in the game, combat, but it's the only time that something happens like in a specific order. Everything else is all simultaneous. It moves fast. There's a ton of depth here, a ton of replayability. If you get the expansion, you can play this up to 8 players, and it's still very fast. Oh man, this game does things that most games do not or can't. This is almost like a game in its own because there's not a lot of things that you can compare it to and say, you can play 4X in 60 minutes, or with 8 players, maybe 90 minutes. There's not a lot of games that you can do this with. It's kind of on a mountain on its own. This is from Roy Kennedy, the designer of Gray Fox Games. This is Last Light.
Number 3.
This next one is sort of a deck building game, but it's an odd one because it's a very puzzly game. It's called After Us. This is from Pandasaurus Games here in North America. Now here what you do is the planet's been vacated and all these different apes are taking over the batteries and all the different resources and they're doing things with them. But this is a very abstractish game where you're taking cards, a tableau of 4 cards, and you're trying to puzzle these cards together to complete different chains. These chains are going to give you different resources, and these resources are going to be used to get a better deck or score points. And so you're building these cards together, gaining resources, and then you're going to be buying better cards. Now these cards you can't see because it doesn't make any sense if you were to see them anyways because they're just puzzles, right? You're building the deck of better cards that are going to get you more resources and more points. The game has a great arc. It's a race to, I think, 60 points. And it's so interesting because each of the different types of cards you buy do different things. One of them allows you to use, it gets a lot of batteries, which allows you to trigger powerful abilities that change each game. Some of them are going to allow you to get points. Some of them allow you to copy other things, right? And so there's a very interesting thing. This is very much a multiplayer solitaire game, but there is some interaction where you can piggyback on other players' end of round action, which is interesting. But the puzzle of this game was so amazing that this game is this high on this list, that it's just so fun. I played it a ton of times. I never get sick of it. After Us.
Number 2.
This next one by far is the heaviest game on this list. It's probably my favorite heavy game of all time. It's called Nucleum. This is from Board and Dice. This is sort of a cross between Brass, if you were to kind of play it in reverse, and Barrage. If you like those 2 heavy games, you're going to like this. There's a lot of network building where you're building your networks up. You're trying to build into certain cities. You're trying to build those networks of rails so that you can gain coal and power different power plants. But then you're trying to get plants to create nucleum. Then you're able to take that power, the energy that you're getting from cities that you've built in your network, and you're able to power them with nucleum, which is more powerful. And the more powerful the plant, the more the city, the more points you're going to get. But there is a ton of things in this game. It is a huge sprawling game with double-sided tiles where you get to select these tiles and do 2 different actions. Or you can put that tile on the board and build your network with it. And now you don't have that tile anymore. You're trying to get contracts, which are going to help you with endgame points, but they're also going to give you some resources and stuff when you get them. There is so much going on in this game. It is super heavy, 3-hour game, but it is amazing. It is just so engaging. The interactions with the player, the flexibility, unlike in Brass, where you can kind of build anywhere you want, and now that's part of your network. This game is the way that the end scoring works. You also have asymmetric technologies that you're unlocking. The game is just unbelievable. It's so good. The only reason why it's not number 1 is because it's such a large game. Between the setup and the teardown and how long the game takes, it's probably going to be one of those games I pull out once or twice a year. I'm going to love every minute of it, but because it's so big, it's not really one that I pull out as often, which is the only reason why it's not on number 1. I expect this to be on many people's number 1 strategy game, Nucleum.
Number 1.
All right, here we have Revive. Now this had a small release last Essen, but it didn't come out to North America till first quarter of this year. Revive is a very interesting sort of medium weight, I think it's got like a 3.5 weight on Board Game Geek, Euro game, with multi-use cards that are so satisfying. You've got these cards that have a top and a bottom. You're going to slot them into your board, and depending on which side you slot is going to be the resources you get. But you're going to be able to upgrade those slots. So if you put a card of a certain color in there, you're going to be able to get more than what you normally are able to get. And once you have all these resources, you're doing all sorts of things. You're exploring different spots on the map. You are creating little you're putting people out there to explore. You're moving them around and exploring. You are placing buildings down there and getting things from there. You're trying to get to the edges of the board, which will allow you to get some huge end game goals. The game has so much going on. You have your own board and you're moving up different tracks of sort of technologies, and you're moving up, and as you get through certain things, you're also unlocking other special abilities. You can customize which abilities those are as well throughout the game, so that your person's always different. You have factions where you have special abilities other players don't. So you're moving up different tracks. All of those tracks are interconnected with each other as well. But the card play of this game is so engaging. You've got board stuff that you're interacting with players. There's just a lot of everything. Player interaction, multi-use cards, faction abilities. This game just has everything. There's a lot going on in this game, but it is still very smooth and very streamlined. Again, 2-player game, you could play this less than an hour. 3 or 4, it's between 60 and 90 minutes, but it's still, oh man. This game is just amazing, and a new expansion just came out for it. I still haven't yet played it, but I'm going to do it soon. Revive. Well, I hope this helped you find some strategy games that you hadn't heard of, or maybe learn more about them. Now, I've reviewed all of these games that are on this list, so if you want to learn more, you can go into my channel and check out all those reviews where I go over them in much more detail. If you haven't yet subscribed, go ahead and do that, and don't miss any of these other end of the game year lists. Go ahead and click that bell to be notified. This has been the Game Boy Geek, breaking down barriers, growing relationships in board games by helping you learn the next one you love. Game Toppers not only transforms your existing table into a high-quality gaming solution, but they now offer full leg kits and dining cover solutions for the full table application. Paired with over 20 styles of thematic game mats in 11 different sizes from notable board game artists like Vincent Dutray, collapsible cup holders, and real cool accessories, experience what thousands of other gamers enjoy by upgrading every game you play with a Game Topper system. Save hundreds of dollars on Game Topper package deals that are in stock now for immediate shipping at GameToppersLLC.com or click the link below.